Before 2023, the archers in my game would just punch things. Let's fix that. For archer in real life, you are basically dropping an arrow at high speed in the X direction. To make the arrow go further, you need to increase the height of the arrow by increasing the angle it's fired at. Due to gravity, objects fired at an angle move in a parabolic arc, going to a maximum height before coming down again. Okay, let's try this. So archery works like normal with 2D side-scrollers in 3D games, but since my game is a 2D game pretending to be on a 3D plane, we need to get more creative. In 3D, since there's a Z direction to sort objects on, an arrow that passes in front of objects will not register as a hit. However, since my game is 2D, we don't have a Z direction to use. An arrow that passes in front of a unit will hit the unit unless we give it special rules telling it what to ignore. In reality, we want the arrow to ignore everything until it gets to its target. But what if it misses the enemy, you might say? Well, it won't. Remember the parabolic arc we talked about? Well, we can actually use math to make our archers perfect aimbots by calculating the arrow's flight path using its speed, starting location, target location, and maximum height. If you want an in-depth look at this, Sebastian League has a great video series on kinematic equations you can watch. And boom, death machines. Let's talk about spawning objects. One way you can think of a game is like a house. When we spawn an object, we bring it into the house. When we're done with an object, we put it in the garbage. This would not be an issue for objects that stay around for a while, but for the arrows, they don't last that long. They spawn, then travel, then die. With all these arrows in the game, we now have a lot more garbage to deal with, which slows down the game. We have to rapidly spend time bringing arrows into the house, and then spend time taking them out again. To fix this, we can do a cool thing called object pooling, which is similar to recycling in real life. So instead of destroying objects after we use them, we just put them aside until we need them again. And if we're applying this to arrows, we might as well apply this to every other object we create and destroy, like armies and buildings. Okay, let's do it. How to do object pooling in Unity. And now we have object pooling, so objects can now be brought back from the dead and recycled later for use. But jokes aside, the best thing you can do as a solo game dev is to work smarter and not harder. Instead of reinventing the wheel, I basically adapt the pooling system in this video by brackeys to every game that needs object pooling. It's simple and effective. The only thing I had to do this time was make sure objects were not going back into the pool until they were done being used. It is actually still usually a lot of effort adding in a pooling system, because a lot of bugs appear since the objects need to have everything about them reset, like their transformations, script values, physics, and so on. I tried to add this once at the end of a game jam, and let me just tell you, maybe don't do that. Now that we have object pooling done, let's finish the rest of the archer mechanics. For arrow functionality, I decided to remove the arrow's collider completely since it complicates its trajectory. Instead, when it gets close to its target, I kill the arrow and check physics collisions using overlap sphere to check what gets hit by the arrow. I then made the arrows less deadly by giving them a chance to hit instead of being an instant kill, and I also decided to remove friendly fire. Since the arrows usually land in a mosh pit of units, the collision check would always include your own units, which does not seem fair since it's not like you can control them directly. We also don't want archers to engage in melee with the rest of the army, so their attack range was increased so that they will shoot arrows first and will only engage in melee if they are close to the enemy. And finally, I made the height of the arrow's arc slightly variable so that it looks less robotic and repetitive. For the visual side, I delete half the arrow on contact to make it look stuck in the ground. I also removed the outline so that it would not create too much visual noise on the map. You may notice I also did this with the dead units and the buildings so the player can clearly see what units they need to pay attention to. I also have a deactivation script that kills objects after a certain number of turns to help with this. The visual clarity of the map is one of the biggest undercover obstacles I've been thinking about. Playing with the outline of objects is one way I've been able to improve this, but another way was to add these little flags that follow the parent army object. This is able to indicate where an army is trying to go and helps the player respond appropriately. I also made it show the number of units in an army for even more clarity. If you see a banner with 6 squares coming towards your territory that has 3 squares, you kind of know who's going to win that fight. It was definitely a happy accident, which is always fun to stumble across. And that's how you make an archer for a 2D game mimicking a 3D game. Let me know what you think in the comments. Like the video if you liked it, and subscribe to see more.